A cocky movie star crashes the grand opening of an elderly martial arts master's academy, publicly mocking the 72-year-old's dancing and calling traditional Wing Chun worthless against real fighting. The arrogant celebrity demands a fight right. They're in front of 30 horrified seniors, escalating his taunts until he crosses the ultimate line by insulting the master's dead wife. But this isn't just any washed-up actor looking for a comeback. This is Steven Seagal himself, and he's just challenged a man who spent 50 years perfecting the deadliest close combat system ever created. The aging action star thinks he's found an easy target for his documentary cameras, but he has no idea that authentic Wing Chun in the hands of a true master can destroy Hollywood aikido in seconds. When the movie legend throws his first punch, expecting to grab and throw like in his films, the old master's response is lightning fast and absolutely devastating. The crowd watches in stunned silence as decades of real training meet decades of movie fighting, and only one man walks away standing. What happens when fake martial arts meets the real thing? Can a movie star's ego survive being humiliated by a grandfather? What happened next would shatter the action hero's reputation forever. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Master Vincent Liu adjusted the red ribbon across the entrance of his new Wing Chun Academy, his weathered hands steady, despite 72 years of life etched into every line. The converted warehouse on Spring Street gleamed with fresh paint and purpose, traditional Chinese calligraphy adorning walls that would soon echo with the sounds of authentic martial arts training 35 community members had gathered for this Saturday afternoon grand opening, their faces reflecting the diverse tapestry of downtown Los Angeles. Retired mechanic Frank Kowalski stood with his thick arms crossed, steel-toed boots planted wide as he surveyed the space with a craftsman's eye. Beside him, former Army nurse Patricia Meadows adjusted her practical glasses, already calculating how the layout would work for the seniors' classes Liu had promised. "Welcome, friends," Liu began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of decades spent teaching. He moved to the center of the polished concrete floor, his simple black cotton pants and white button-down shirt a stark contrast to the ornate wooden training dummies flanking him. "Today we begin something Margaret and I dreamed of for many years." The mention of his late wife brought a gentle smile to his lined face. Margaret had been gone 2 years now, claimed by cancer despite 40 years of shared dedication to healing arts and martial wisdom. This academy was his tribute to her memory, their final collaboration across the boundary of death. Liu settled into the opening stance of Shu Nim Tao, the little idea form that contained Wing Chun's fundamental principles. His movements flowed like water over stone, each technique precise and economical. The crowd watched in respectful silence as he demonstrated the art's philosophy through motion. "We do not seek to dominate," he explained, transitioning into the second section, "but to neutralize. Not to destroy, but to redirect." His hands carved invisible pathways through the air, deflecting imaginary attacks with graceful efficiency. Frank leaned toward Patricia, his voice barely above a whisper. "Never seen anything like that. Guy moves like he's 30 years younger." But Liu's attention had shifted. At the back of the crowd, a tall figure in black leather jacket and dark sunglasses stood motionless, arms crossed, studying every movement with predatory intensity. The stranger's presence created a subtle tension that rippled through the gathered neighbors like a stone dropped in still water. Liu paused mid-demonstration, his martial artist's instincts detecting something that didn't belong in this peaceful gathering. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, both men recognized that this grand opening was about to become something far more significant than a simple neighborhood celebration. The tension in the academy grew palpable as Liu continued his demonstration, though his attention remained divided between his audience and the mysterious observer. The stranger moved with deliberate silence along the wall, never breaking his predatory stare, his boots making no sound on the polished floor. Frank shifted uncomfortably, his marine instincts awakening. "That guy's been staring like he's sizing up the place for a robbery," he muttered to Patricia, who followed his gaze to the motionless figure. The stranger's presence seemed to absorb light from the space around him. While Liu's other guests murmured appreciation for the flowing techniques, This man watched with the calculating patience of a hunter evaluating prey. When Liu invited young Danny Reeves forward to demonstrate Chi Sa, the sensitive, sticky, hands training that formed Wing Chun's tactical heart, the observer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Through touch, we feel our opponent's intentions before they act, Liu explained, his forearms maintaining contact with Danny's as they moved in the ancient dance of attack and defense. The hands become eyes that see without looking. The demonstration showcased Wing Chun's core principle, that sensitivity could overcome strength, that understanding an opponent's force was more valuable than possessing superior power. Danny's enthusiasm was infectious as he learned to redirect Liu's gentle pressure, turning what could have been resistance into harmony. But the stranger's reaction was anything but harmonious. His leather jacket creaked as his arms tightened across his chest, and something cold flickered behind those dark sunglasses. Whatever he was seeing in Liu's authentic martial arts stirred memories or emotions that clearly unsettled him. Patricia noticed the shift in atmosphere too. As a former military nurse, she developed an instinct for recognizing dangerous personalities, and this man radiated the kind of controlled menace that preceded violence. "Vincent," she said quietly, using Liu's first name with the familiarity of a concerned neighbor. "Maybe we should." Her words were cut short as the stranger finally moved. His boots clicked against the concrete with measured precision as he approached, the crowd parting instinctively before him. There was something about his bearing that commanded space, demanded attention, and suggested that whatever was about to happen would change the peaceful nature of this gathering forever. Liu concluded his demonstration with a respectful bow, hands folded behind his back in traditional posture, but his students could sense the subtle shift in his energy. The old master remained perfectly centered, yet alert, as the two men faced each other for the first time, separated by mere feet and an ocean of unknown intentions. The stranger slowly removed his dark sunglasses, revealing a face that several in the crowd recognized immediately. Steven Seagal's unmistakable features, the angular jaw, the calculating eyes, the aura of manufactured menace, caused a ripple of whispered recognition through the academy. "Under siege guy," Frank muttered under his breath, while Patricia's expression shifted from concern to distaste. The action star's reputation for arrogance was well known, even among those who'd once enjoyed his films. "Interesting demonstration, old man," Seagal said, his gravelly voice carrying that familiar tone of casual dismissal. "Very traditional." The way he emphasized the word made it sound like an insult, a relic from a bygone era that had no place in the modern world. Liu maintained his composed stance, hands still folded behind his back. "Tradition carries the wisdom of generations, mister." His voice remained level, though his students could detect the subtle steel beneath the courtesy. "Seagal. Steven Seagal." The name dropped like a stone into still water. And sometimes tradition is just another word for outdated. The academy fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of Los Angeles traffic. Liu's students exchanged worried glances. Danny's hands clenched into fists, while the older community members moved almost unconsciously closer to their teacher. Frank's face flushed red with indignation. He'd served 2 tours in Vietnam and had no patience for Hollywood tough guys who'd never faced real violence. Patricia's medical training kept her calm, but her sharp eyes noted the body language of both men. Reading the signs of escalating confrontation, Seagal began to circle Liu with predatory slowness, like a wolf evaluating a potential meal. The movement was clearly intended to intimidate, to establish dominance through physical presence and implied threat. But Liu remained perfectly still, centered in more than just physical balance. "That dancing you just showed us," Seagal continued, his voice growing more aggressive. "It's pretty to watch, but would it last 5 seconds against real martial arts?" His emphasis on real carried decades of Hollywood arrogance, the assumption that movie violence somehow trumped authentic tradition. That Liu's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Not fear, but the recognition that this confrontation was moving beyond mere words. The peaceful grand opening he'd planned to honor Margaret's memory was transforming into something that would test every principle he'd spent a lifetime cultivating. The challenge hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle, and everyone present understood that whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of this afternoon, but the very soul of what Liu was trying to build in his wife's honor. Chapter 4. Liu maintained his centered stance as Seagal continued his intimidating circle, the movie star's boots clicking against the concrete with calculated precision. The academy's other visitors began backing toward the exit, sensing the building confrontation like animals before a storm. Real martial arts isn't about forms and philosophy, old man, Seagal declared, stopping directly in front of Liu and using his 6'4" frame to loom over the smaller master. It's about who's left standing when the dust settles. Liu's response carried the patient wisdom of Buddhist teaching. Martial arts without wisdom is merely violence, Mr. Seagal. Without respect, it becomes brutality. His voice remained calm, but those who knew him could detect the subtle shift in his breathing, the centering that preceded decisive action. Danny stepped protectively closer to his Sifu, his 19-year-old sense of justice outraged by the blatant disrespect. But Liu's barely perceptible hand gesture kept his student in place. This was not a moment for youthful passion, but for the measured response of experience. Respect is earned through strength. Seagal shot back, his Hollywood confidence growing with each word. Your Wing Chun against my aikido, right here, right now. Show these people what their money bought them. The suggestion sent murmurs of alarm through the remaining crowd. Frank's Marine training told him to intervene, while Patricia's medical background made her calculate potential injuries. But Liu himself seemed strangely unaffected by the escalating pressure. I appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. Seagal, Liu replied with diplomatic restraint. However, this is a place of learning, not proving. His bow was slight, not submission, but acknowledgement of the challenge while maintaining his principles. Seagal's face darkened with frustration. The old man's refusal to take the bait wounded his pride more than any physical blow could have. In his world, respect was taken by force, dominance established through intimidation. Liu's quiet dignity was an affront to everything he believed about power. Scared old man. The taunt carried the crude psychology of a schoolyard bully. I thought the Chinese were supposed to be honorable. The insult hit its mark. Liu's eyes flashed momentarily, not with anger, but with the recognition that peaceful resolution was slipping away. Frank took a half-step forward, his weathered face flushed with indignation, while Patricia's hand moved instinctively toward her purse where she kept her cell phone. The academy held its breath as two philosophies faced each other, the manufactured aggression of Hollywood violence versus the authentic discipline of traditional martial arts. In that moment of suspended tension, everyone present understood they were witnessing more than a confrontation between two men. This was a collision between different worlds, different values, different definitions of what it meant to be strong. The tension in the academy escalated as Seagal's frustration mounted. His voice rose with each word, the Hollywood veneer of controlled menace giving way to genuine anger. Maybe your students should know their teacher runs from real challenges. Liu's composure began showing hairline cracks as several visitors glanced uncertainly toward the exit. The peaceful atmosphere he'd worked so hard to create was disintegrating under Seagal's relentless assault on his character and teachings. That Danny's fists clenched tighter, his young face flushed with protective rage. Frank moved closer to the confrontation, his thick shoulders squared for action despite the obvious size disadvantage. Patricia whispered urgently, "This isn't right. Someone should call security." But there was no security, just a 72-year-old martial arts teacher facing down a movie star with wounded pride and something to prove. I've dealt with plenty of your type, Seagal continued, feeding off the discomfort rippling through the crowd. Hiding behind ancient mysticism because you can't handle modern reality. All that philosophical nonsense is just an excuse for weakness. The attack on Wing Chun's spiritual foundation struck deeper than physical threats. Liu had spent 5 decades understanding that true martial arts transcended mere fighting techniques, encompassing healing, meditation, and moral development. To hear it dismissed as mystical nonsense felt like watching someone desecrate a sacred shrine. Liu's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the first visible crack in his Buddhist calm. The wooden training dummies seemed to watch silently as their master faced the greatest test of his principles. Violence would be easy. Maintaining dignity under assault required far greater strength. Your whole system is built on avoiding confrontation. Seagal pressed, sensing vulnerability. What happens when avoidance isn't an option? When someone wants to hurt your students, your neighbors, your Mr. Seagal. Lou interrupted, his voice carrying a warning edge that made Danny step back. Instinctively, the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the old master's presence shifted from grandfatherly warmth to something far more dangerous. But Seagal, drunk on his own momentum and the crowd's horrified attention, failed to recognize the warning signs. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the academy. Your wife Margaret taught here too, didn't she? The words fell like poison into still water. Maybe if she'd learned real fighting instead of this interpretive dance, the cancer wouldn't have gotten her so easily. Maybe she'd still be alive if the academy went dead silent. Even the distant traffic noise seemed to fade as the enormity of the insult settled over the gathering like a suffocating blanket. The silence stretched for 10 heartbeats that felt like eternity. Lou's breathing became deliberately controlled, not the centering of meditation, but the dangerous calm that preceded a typhoon. When he looked up at Seagal, there was something ancient and implacable in his dark eyes that Frank's face had gone beyond red to purple with rage. Patricia covered her mouth, in shock at the casual cruelty of using a dead woman's memory as a weapon. Danny and the other students looked ready to attack despite the consequences, but Lou's subtle hand gesture kept them frozen in place. My wife's memory deserves better than your ignorance, Mr. Seagal, Lou said, each word precise and weighted with 40 years of love and 2 years of grief. The temperature of his voice could have frozen steel at Margaret's photograph watched from the memorial shrine Lou had erected near the entrance. Her gentle smile a stark contrast to the ugliness that had invaded her husband's peaceful academy. She had been the healing heart of their partnership, teaching women's self-defense and traditional Chinese medicine, while Lou focused on combat applications. Her loss had nearly broken him, and only the decision to open this academy in her honor had given his life new purpose. Lou stepped forward one precise pace, closing distance with calculated intent. The movement was small but significant, the difference between defensive and offensive positioning. Everyone present felt the shift. In his energy, the transformation from peaceful teacher to something far more dangerous. You wish to test Wing Chun against aikido? Lou's voice carried quiet steel. Very well. Traditional Lei Tai rules. No holds barred until submission or unconsciousness. The formal challenge hung in the air like a drawn blade. Seagal's confident smirk faltered slightly at the cold determination in Lou's voice, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. Finally, let's see what 40 years of dancing taught you. As word of the impending fight spread through whispered phone calls and hasty texts, more people began arriving at the academy. The crowd swelled beyond the building's capacity as neighbors. Martial arts students from other schools and curious onlookers pressed against the windows. Patricia positioned herself near the makeshift ring with her first aid kit, her military medical training overriding personal feelings. Frank appointed himself unofficial referee, though both fighters seemed beyond listening to outside voices. Lou retreated to a corner to center himself through brief meditation, while Seagal stretched and shadowboxed for the growing audience. The contrast was stark, the old master sitting in perfect stillness versus the movie star playing to the cameras already appearing in the crowd. The academy buzzed with nervous energy as furniture was hastily moved aside to create fighting space. What had begun as a peaceful grand opening was transforming into something that would be remembered long after the last spectator went home. Within 15 minutes, the academy filled beyond its intended capacity. Word had spread through social media like wildfire. Steven Seagal challenges elderly Wing Chun master to real fight. Spectators lined every available wall space. Phones emerged to record the impending confrontation, and informal betting began among the younger observers. The crowd represented a cross-section of Los Angeles. Curious martial artists from other schools, neighborhood residents drawn by the commotion, and social media followers hoping to witness either a spectacular fight or a viral embarrassment. The energy was electric with anticipation and underlying tension. Lou emerged from his corner meditation with perfect composure restored. The brief centering had transformed his earlier anger into something far more dangerous, focused intent. He moved with fluid grace to help clear the central space, his simple black pants and white shirt making him appear almost spectral among the more colorfully dressed spectators. Frank took charge of creating the makeshift fighting area, his marine training evident in the efficient way he organized the chaos. Folding chairs were stacked against walls, the wooden training dummies were moved to safe distances, and a rough circle was cleared on the polished concrete floor. "Gentlemen," Frank announced in his gravelly voice, "this is supposed to be about martial arts, not ego. Keep it clean, and nobody gets permanently hurt." His words carried the authority of someone who'd seen real violence and knew its consequences. Patricia positioned herself strategically with her medical kit, calculating angles and distances with the precision of someone who'd treated combat wounds under fire. Her green eyes missed nothing as she assessed both fighters for signs of serious intent versus mere posturing. Seagal played to the crowd during his warm-up routine, stretching dramatically and executing sharp hand movements that drew appreciative murmurs from those unfamiliar with authentic martial arts. His black leather jacket had been discarded, revealing a black t-shirt that emphasized his still imposing frame. The contrast with Liu was striking. The elderly master simply stood in the center of the cleared space, hands loose at his sides, breathing steady and deep. To untrained eyes, he appeared almost fragile next to Seagal's bulk, but experienced martial artists in the crowd recognized the coiled energy in his deceptively relaxed posture. Danny watched from the sidelines with a mixture of pride and worry, knowing his Sifu's skill but concerned about the age and size disadvantages. Other Wing Chun students clustered nearby, their faith in Liu's abilities warring with natural concern for their beloved teacher. The two fighters finally faced each other in the improvised ring, Seagal radiating Hollywood confidence and Liu embodying quiet mastery. Frank raised his hand for silence, and the academy held its collective breath. Frank's hand dropped, and the fight began with explosive suddenness. Seagal immediately took the offensive, his aikido training evident in the way he sought to close distance and establish gripping control. His opening attack was a powerful straight punch designed to overwhelm through sheer force, the kind of technique that had worked in countless movie fights. But Liu's response demonstrated why authentic Wing Chun had survived centuries of real combat. As Seagal's punch drove toward his center line, Liu executed simultaneous defense and attack with textbook precision. His left hand performed Pak Saw, the slapping deflection that redirected Seagal's force while opening his guard, while his right hand launched a straight punch down the center line. The combination happened in less than 2 seconds, a blur of economical motion that showcased Wing Chun's fundamental principle. The shortest distance between 2 points was a straight line, and the most efficient defense was one that simultaneously attacked. Seagal, expecting to grab and throw using aikido's leverage-based techniques, instead found his attack completely neutralized. Liu's deflection sent his punch harmlessly past its target while compromising his balance and exposing his solar plexus to the counterattack. Liu's straight punch was not delivered with devastating power. That wasn't Wing Chun's way. Instead, it was precisely placed and perfectly timed, catching Seagal at the moment when his forward momentum made him most vulnerable. The impact to his solar plexus was enough to disrupt his breathing and balance without causing serious injury. The effect was devastating in its simplicity. Seagal's own forward momentum, redirected by Liu's expert technique, carried him backward into the folding chairs that had been hastily stacked against the wall. The crash of metal and the thud of his body hitting the concrete floor created a tremendous cacophony that punctuated the sudden end of his Hollywood confidence. The crowd erupted in chaos, some cheering for the unexpected victory, others gasping in disbelief at seeing the movie star taken down so quickly and decisively. Phones captured every angle of Seagal's embarrassing tumble among the scattered chairs, his black outfit a stark contrast against the academy's polished floor. As Seagal struggled to get up, winded and clearly shaken, a young Asian man with professional camera equipment pushed through the stunned spectators. Marcus Chin's grin was infectious as he captured every moment of the aftermath. "That was perfect. Absolutely perfect," Marcus shouted over the crowd noise, his camera still rolling. "Mr. Seagal, The internet is going to love this comeback story. His enthusiasm was palpable, but something in his tone made Lu's expression shift from satisfaction to suspicion. The revelation that this had been more than a spontaneous confrontation hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished flame, and Lu realized that his simple grand opening had become something far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Marcus continued filming as he helped Seagal to his feet, his excitement palpable as he captured every angle of the aftermath. Keep rolling, keep rolling, he muttered to himself, adjusting camera settings with practiced efficiency. This is exactly the authentic reaction we needed. Lu watched with growing unease as the young man's professional demeanor became impossible to ignore. Multiple camera angles, backup recording equipment visible in a nearby bag, and what appeared to be a detailed shooting script protruding from Marcus's back pocket. All signs that this confrontation had been anything but spontaneous. Frank and Patricia exchanged concerned glances as they began to understand the implications. Several Academy visitors murmured angrily among themselves, realizing they'd been unwitting participants in some kind of stage production. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced to the crowd, his camera still capturing their reactions, "you've just witnessed the opening scene of Steven Seagal's comeback documentary, Still Got It. A Legend Returns." His voice carried the enthusiasm of someone who believed he'd just captured gold. The Academy erupted in confused chatter. Some visitors felt betrayed by the deception, while others seemed intrigued by their accidental participation in a film production. Danny and the other Wing Chun students clustered protectively around Lu, their faces reflecting a mixture of confusion and growing anger. Seagal, still catching his breath and clearly embarrassed by both his defeat and the revelation, looked uncomfortable with Marcus's enthusiastic documentation. "Turn that damn thing off," he growled. But Marcus seemed oblivious to his star's discomfort. "The research phase was crucial," Marcus continued, addressing the crowd like a film school professor. "We investigated local martial arts schools, looking for the perfect opponent, someone traditional, elderly, likely to be intimidated by Mr. Seagal's reputation and celebrity status." Lu's face hardened as the full scope of their manipulation became clear, his dark eyes fixed on Marcus with laser intensity. This was all stage theater? The question carried decades of dignified authority that made the young filmmaker pause mid-sentence. Marcus nodded enthusiastically, apparently missing the dangerous undertone in Lu's voice. "We needed someone who would make Steven look good on camera, a respectful master who would acknowledge his superiority and maybe even ask for autographs afterward. You were supposed to be honored by the attention, grateful for the opportunity to appear in his comeback story." The calculation behind their choice was now painfully obvious. They had researched him like a laboratory specimen, studying his background, his recent loss, his gentle teaching philosophy, and concluded he would be easy prey for their manufactured drama that Lu's students gathered around their master, their protective instincts aroused by the casual cruelty of the deception. Patricia stepped closer as well, her medical training reading the subtle signs of controlled fury in the elderly master's posture. The crowd began to disperse, their initial excitement curdling into disappointment and disgust at the manufactured nature of the confrontation. Some left muttering about fake Hollywood nonsense, while others lingered out of curiosity about what would happen next between the three men at the center of the deception. Seagal pushed away from Marcus's cameras with growing irritation, his wounded pride now compounded by embarrassment at having his scheme exposed so publicly. "I said turn those cameras off," he snapped, but his voice lacked its earlier commanding presence. "This isn't over, old man," Seagal declared, attempting to salvage some dignity from the disaster. "That was a lucky shot because I wasn't ready for your cheap tricks. I underestimated you, but that won't happen again." Lu's response was measured but carried an edge of steel. "There was nothing lucky about technique perfected over 5 decades, Mr. Seagal. Your preparation, or lack thereof, was your own responsibility." The words stung because they were true, and everyone present could hear the authentic authority behind them. Frank stepped between the two men as tension began rebuilding, his marine instincts recognizing the signs of escalating conflict. "Gentlemen, I think we've all had enough excitement for one day," he said diplomatically, though his weathered face showed clear disapproval of Seagal's behavior. Patricia, her professional medical training overriding personal feelings, approached Seagal with her first aid kit. "You hit those chairs pretty hard," she said matter-of-factly. "Let me check for serious injuries." Her tone was clinical rather than sympathetic, but her ethics demanded she ensure his well-being regardless of her opinion of his character. Seagal initially waved her away, but a sharp pain in his ribs where he'd impacted the metal chair forced him to accept her assistance. As Patricia conducted her examination with professional efficiency, her gentle probing revealed bruising but no breaks. "You'll be sore for a few days, but nothing's broken," she reported. "Ice and rest should handle the worst of it." Her bedside manner was competent but cool, making it clear she was helping because it was right, not because she approved of his actions. Marcus hovered nearby, still filming despite Seagal's objections, apparently believing that this behind-the-scenes drama would enhance his documentary's authenticity. His enthusiasm seemed undiminished by the hostile reception his revelation had received. "No cameras, no audience, no interruptions," Seagal said suddenly, his voice cutting through the murmur of remaining spectators. "Just you and me, for real this time. Tomorrow night, after you close, I'll show you what happens when I'm actually trying." Lou considered the challenge, seeing the genuine anger beneath Seagal's wounded ego. Despite everything, he recognized a man struggling with his own failures and limitations, lashing out at the nearest available target. "Very well," Lou replied after a long moment. "But this ends it. Win or lose, you leave my academy and my students alone afterward." They shook hands, and the firmness of the grip told both men that tomorrow's encounter would be far more dangerous than today's brief exchange. The next evening, Lou prepared to close the academy when he caught sight of Marcus pacing frantically. In the parking lot, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. Through the large windows, Lou could see the young man's agitated gestures and increasingly desperate body language. Curiosity overrode his desire to avoid further complications. Lou moved closer to the window, and fragments of conversation drifted through the glass. Marcus was speaking in what sounded like English, but with a heavy accent that Lou couldn't immediately place. "No, no, Mr. Volkov," Marcus was saying, his voice rising with each word. "It's just a temporary setback. The comeback angle is even stronger now. Real adversity, genuine challenge. Steven will deliver what we promised, I guarantee it." Lou's expression grew grave as he recognized the tone of someone in serious trouble with dangerous people. The name Volkov carried Slavic overtones that suggested connections Lou had hoped never to encounter in his peaceful world of traditional martial arts. Marcus continued his desperate explanation. "The investors will get their money back, plus substantial profit. The documentary will be huge, viral content, streaming deals, international distribution. We just need a little more time to turn this around." The conversation grew more heated, with Marcus's responses becoming increasingly frantic. "I understand the timeline, but good content takes time to develop properly. Rushed work won't generate the returns everyone expects." Lou could see the young man's shoulders sagging as the call progressed, his earlier enthusiasm completely evaporated. When Marcus finally ended the conversation, he stood motionless in the parking lot, staring at his phone with the expression of someone who'd just received very bad news. Against his better judgment, Lou made a decision that would complicate everything. Instead of waiting safely inside for Seagal to arrive for their scheduled private match, he walked outside to confront the obviously troubled young man. "Mr. Chun," Lou called softly, using the name he'd overheard earlier. "I couldn't help noticing your distress. What kind of trouble are you and Mr. Seagal really facing?" Marcus spun around, startled by the unexpected approach. His first instinct was clearly to lie or deflect, but something in Lou's grandfatherly concern and genuine interest broke through his defenses. "It's complicated," Marcus began hesitantly, then seemed to realize that his situation had moved far beyond the point where simple explanations would suffice. The weight of whatever he was carrying was clearly too much for him to bear alone. Lou waited patiently, recognizing the moment when someone needed to unburden themselves to a sympathetic listener. His decades of teaching had taught him that sometimes the greatest gift you could offer was simply the willingness to listen without judgment. "Mr. Lou," Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I think I may have gotten us all into something much more dangerous than any of us realized. Marcus led Lou to a quiet corner of the parking lot, away from the street lights and potential eavesdroppers. The young man's composure had completely cracked, revealing the frightened person beneath the confident filmmaker facade. Steven borrowed heavily against future earnings to finance his last few projects. Marcus began, his words tumbling out in a rush. When those films failed, and I mean really failed, not just bad reviews, but complete financial disasters, the investors started demanding immediate returns. Lou listened without interruption as the full scope of their predicament emerged. The investors weren't traditional Hollywood financiers, but a group led by a Russian businessman named Dmitry Volkov, whose lending practices operated far outside conventional legal boundaries. They're demanding $3 million plus interest. Marcus continued, his voice shaking. If Steven can't pay, they'll take his house, his cars, everything he owns. And that's if he's lucky. The documentary had been conceived as a desperate cash grab, designed to showcase Seagal's continued relevance and martial arts prowess. The plan required defeating a series of authentic martial artists on camera, creating viral content that could be packaged into streaming deals and international distribution. We researched local schools for weeks, Marcus admitted, shame evident in his voice. We needed traditional masters who would be impressed by celebrity status, grateful for the attention, unlikely to seriously resist. Elderly instructors seemed like the safest targets. Lou's jaw tightened as he understood the calculated cruelty behind their selection process. They had studied his background, his recent loss, his gentle teaching philosophy, his emphasis on respect and tradition, and concluded he would be easily manipulated. The plan was simple, Marcus continued. Steven would arrive, issue a respectful challenge, demonstrate his superiority through careful choreography, and everyone would leave happy. You were supposed to be honored by the opportunity, maybe even ask for an autograph. The sound of a motorcycle engine interrupted their conversation. Lou looked up to see Seagal arriving on a borrowed Harley, his leather jacket and serious expression suggesting he was prepared for the private rematch they'd arranged. But as Seagal approached, he noticed Lou deep in conversation with Marcus and immediately grew suspicious. What's this about? He demanded, his voice carrying the paranoia of someone whose plans had already gone wrong once. That Lou's response surprised both younger men. Mr. Seagal, I believe we're all victims of circumstances larger than personal pride. Perhaps we should discuss solutions rather than create more problems. Marcus looked between the two men with growing hope, while Seagal's expression shifted from suspicion to curiosity. For the first time since this whole situation began, someone was suggesting cooperation instead of confrontation. You want to help us? Seagal asked incredulously. After everything we put you through? Lou's smile was gentle but carried the wisdom of 7 decades. Mr. Seagal, anger is a luxury I can't afford when people's safety is at stake. And from what I'm hearing, this situation involves more than just wounded pride. Initially resistant to Lou's peacekeeping efforts, Seagal grudgingly accepted the invitation inside and took a seat at the small consultation table Lou kept for private discussions. The academy felt different in the evening light. Shadows from the wooden training dummies created an almost sacred atmosphere that seemed to calm everyone's frayed nerves. As Marcus reluctantly filled in the remaining details about their financial nightmare, Lou observed Seagal's genuine distress beneath his defensive bravado. The movie star's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the tea Lou had prepared, and his usual swagger had been replaced by the slumped posture of a man facing consequences he couldn't fight his way out of. I used to love martial arts, Seagal admitted quietly, staring into his teacup, before it became about money and image and proving things to people who didn't matter. I had a legitimate black belt in aikido, earned it the hard way, with years of training and real respect for the art. Lou recognized the lost passion that often drove people to destructive choices. He'd seen it before in students who became so focused on external validation that they forgot why they'd started training in the first place. Hollywood changed everything, Seagal continued, his voice carrying decades of regret. Suddenly it wasn't about learning or growing or understanding. It was about looking tough for cameras, about selling an image that had nothing to do with real martial arts. I got so caught up in the performance that I forgot what authentic training felt like. Patricia appeared at the academy's entrance, having noticed the lights still on during her evening walk home from her nearby medical office. Concerned for Lou's welfare after the day's events, she knocked softly before entering. "Vincent, I saw the lights and wanted to make sure everything was all right," she said, her trained eyes immediately assessing the situation. The sight of Lou calmly serving tea to the two men who had disrupted his grand opening was so unexpected that she paused in the doorway. "Please, join us," Lou invited. "I believe we're all going to need each other's wisdom to navigate what's coming." Patricia settled into the fourth chair around the small table, her military bearing evident in the way she evaluated both Marcus and Seagal for signs of deception or danger. Her presence seemed to anchor the group, providing the practical perspective that balanced Lou's philosophical approach. The conversation was interrupted by the rumble of motorcycle engines outside. Through the academy's large windows, they could see 5 men in leather jackets surrounding the building, their bikes creating a deliberate perimeter that blocked all obvious escape routes. The lead rider dismounted with predatory grace, removing his helmet to reveal Slavic features and prison tattoos that spoke of a violent past. His pale blue eyes surveyed the academy's interior with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to taking what he wanted through force. Marcus went visibly pale, his hands shaking as he whispered, "That's Dmitry Volkov. He wasn't supposed to come personally unless." His voice trailed off as the implications became clear. Lou realized their situation had just escalated beyond anything his peaceful philosophy had prepared him for. Volkov entered the academy with 2 lieutenants flanking him, while his remaining men stayed outside as lookouts. His massive presence seemed to absorb light from the space around him, and his movements carried the fluid confidence of someone who had never encountered serious resistance. "Mr. Seagal," Volkov said, his English precise despite a heavy Russian accent, "you have disappointed me greatly. This morning I watched video of you being humiliated by an elderly Chinese man. This does not inspire confidence in our investment." His voice carried the educated precision of someone who had chosen violence as a business tool rather than an emotional outlet. Everything about him, from his expensive leather jacket to his carefully maintained prison tattoos, spoke of professional criminality operating at the highest levels. Seagal attempted to explain about comeback narratives and documentary angles, but Volkov cut him off with a dismissive gesture. "I do not care about your movie fantasies, Steven. I care about $3 million you owe, plus accumulated interest that grows daily." Lou stepped forward with quiet courage that surprised everyone present, including himself. "Sir, this is private property. I must ask you to leave." His voice remained steady despite the obvious danger, drawing on decades of centering discipline to maintain composure. Volkov's laugh was completely devoid of warmth or humor. "Old man, you are actually the reason for our visit today. You made our business partner look foolish in front of cameras, which affects his earning potential and therefore our return on investment." Patricia remained seated, but her military training was evident in the way she assessed exits and potential weapons while maintaining an appearance of calm. Her medical bag was within easy reach, though she suspected it might be needed for more than routine first aid before this encounter ended. Marcus sat frozen with terror, clearly understanding the implications of Volkov's personal appearance far better than the others. His earlier enthusiasm for capturing dramatic footage had completely evaporated in the face of real danger. "Here are your options, Steven," Volkov continued with businesslike efficiency. "Option 1. You produce $3 million plus interest within 48 hours. Option 2. You create video content guaranteed to generate equivalent revenue through viral distribution and streaming deals." The ultimatum hung in the air like a blade suspended by a thread. Volkov's calm delivery made it clear he viewed this as a routine business transaction rather than a threat to human lives. "If neither option materializes," he added with the same conversational tone, "we will reclaim our investment through alternative assets. Your house, your cars, your continued ability to work in this industry." The euphemistic language barely concealed the violence underneath. Lou felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as he realized his intervention in their conflict had escalated everyone's danger. His simple desire to honor Margaret's memory through teaching had somehow entangled him in a web of criminal finance and potential violence. As the Russians prepared to leave, Volkov's pale eyes fixed on Lou with calculating interest. "Old man, I suggest you encourage your new friend to make wise choices. It would be unfortunate if innocent people suffered because of his poor judgment." After Volkov's departure, Lou carefully locked the academy's entrance and suggested they continue their discussion in his private apartment above the school. The simple living space reflected a life dedicated to martial arts rather than material accumulation. Traditional weapons mounted on walls, classical Chinese furniture, and dozens of photographs documenting his decades with Margaret. Lou prepared fresh tea with hands that showed only the slightest tremor. Seagal studied the photographs with growing respect for the genuine relationship behind Lou's earlier anger. Images of the couple teaching together, traveling to martial arts seminars, and simply enjoying quiet moments revealed a partnership built on shared purpose and deep affection. "She was beautiful," Seagal said quietly, examining a photo of Margaret, demonstrating women's self-defense techniques. "I can see why my words about her hurt so much. I was out of line, way out of line." Marcus, still shaken by his encounter with Volkov, explained that the Russians' threat about innocent people was not idle intimidation. "He's used violence against family members, business associates, anyone who cost him money. Your academy and students might be at risk now because you got involved in our mess." Lou absorbed this information with the calm acceptance of someone who had already committed to a course of action. "Then we must ensure that no one else pays the price for decisions they didn't make." Patricia returned after witnessing the motorcycle's departure, her concern for Lou's safety overriding any desire to avoid further complications. When the situation was explained, her military background immediately shifted into tactical mode. "If they're willing to use violence for financial leverage, they won't stop with verbal threats," she said matter-of-factly. "We need to be prepared for escalation, not hope for peaceful resolution." Frank arrived to walk Patricia home as he did most evenings, part of their comfortable routine that had developed over years of neighboring. Learning about the threat to Lou in the academy, he immediately volunteered his Marine Corps experience despite being well past his fighting prime. "I didn't survive 2 tours in Vietnam to let some Russian gangster intimidate my friends," Frank declared with the straightforward loyalty that had defined his entire life. "If they want trouble, they picked the wrong neighborhood." Lou found himself surrounded by unlikely allies willing to stand with him against professional criminals. The irony wasn't lost on him. His attempt to create a peaceful sanctuary had instead drawn together a community of protectors ready to face violence. If necessary, Patricia began making practical preparations, using her medical training to stock supplies for treating potential injuries. Frank conducted an informal security assessment of the academy, noting entry points, defensive positions, and potential weapons available from training equipment. "We'll make our stand here if we have to," Frank said grimly. "But let's hope it doesn't come to that." Seagal watched their preparations with growing amazement and shame. These people barely knew him, had every reason to hate him for the trouble he'd brought to their peaceful lives. Yet they were preparing to risk themselves for his sake. "Why?" he asked Lou directly. "Why help someone who treated you so badly?" Lou's answer carried the wisdom of Buddhist philosophy tempered by practical necessity. "Mr. Seagal, we are all connected in ways we don't always understand. Your pain became my responsibility the moment I chose to involve myself. Now we face the consequences together." Over the next 24 hours, an unexpected camaraderie developed among the unlikely group. Lou began teaching Seagal authentic Wing Chun principles, stripping away the Hollywood flash that had corrupted his original martial arts foundation. The lessons took place in the early morning hours, when the academy was empty and peaceful. "Forget everything you think you know about fighting for cameras," Lou instructed patiently. "Real combat is about efficiency, not spectacle. Wing Chun seeks the shortest path to neutralizing a threat, nothing more or less." Seagal, humbled by genuine instruction from a master teacher, rediscovered his original passion for martial arts learning. Under Lou's guidance, he began to remember why he had fallen in love with martial arts decades before Hollywood corrupted his understanding. Frank contributed his military expertise, teaching basic tactical awareness and defensive positioning. It's not about being heroes, he explained. It's about making the other guy think twice before starting something he might not be able to finish. Patricia organized medical supplies and established communication protocols, her efficient preparation, revealing the depth of her military experience. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, she said simply. That's how you keep people alive when things go bad. Their growing trust and mutual respect suggested that perhaps they could find a peaceful solution to the crisis. Lou's wisdom, combined with Frank's tactics and Patricia's medical expertise, created a foundation for effective resistance if violence became unavoidable. Marcus seemed to gain confidence from their unity, his filmmakers eye documenting their preparations not for exploitation but for evidence if legal proceedings became necessary. For the first time since this started, I feel like we might actually survive this, he admitted. The breakthrough came when Marcus revealed he had secretly recorded his most recent phone conversation with Volkov using an app designed for journalism interviews. I thought it might be useful as evidence if things went wrong, he explained, but as they gathered around Marcus's phone to listen to the recording, their growing optimism was shattered by what they heard. Volkov's voice was crystal clear as he outlined his real strategy to his lieutenant. Let them think they have time to prepare. Tomorrow night, we visit the old Chinese man's school. If Seagal tries to protect him, we hurt them both and send a message about interfering with our business. If he runs like the coward he is, we hunt him down anyway. Either way, we collect what we're owed plus interest for the inconvenience. The recording continued with operational details that made it clear Volkov had never intended to wait 48 hours or negotiate in good faith. The violence was scheduled for the following evening, and all their careful preparation had been based on false assumptions about their enemy's timeline. Lou realized with sinking certainty that despite their growing trust and mutual respect, they had been planning for the wrong scenario entirely. Volkov's approach would be swift, brutal, and designed to make an example that would discourage future interference with his business operations. He's coming tonight, Lou said quietly, the weight of inevitable confrontation settling over the group like a shroud. And all our preparation may not be enough against professional criminals with nothing to lose. The academy suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap, with all of them caught inside waiting for predators who held every advantage except the element of surprise, which they had just lost, the revelation that Volkov had never intended to honor his 48-hour deadline hit the group like a physical blow. Lou stared at Marcus's phone as the implications became clear. All their careful planning had been based on a false premise, and the violence they'd hoped to avoid was now inevitable and imminent. I brought this to your door, Seagal said, his voice heavy with genuine remorse. Every time I think I've hit bottom, I find new ways to hurt decent people who don't deserve it. His earlier arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by the crushing weight of responsibility for endangering innocent lives. Lou placed a steadying hand on Seagal's shoulder, drawing on Buddhist philosophy to maintain perspective in the face of crisis. We all make choices that seem right at the time, Mr. Seagal. What matters now is what we choose when we can see the situation clearly. Frank interrupted their philosophical reflection with military pragmatism. Philosophy later. Tactics now. If they're coming tonight, we need to decide whether to run or fight, and we need to decide fast. Patricia checked her watch, 6:30 p.m. Sunset was still an hour away, but professional criminals would likely wait for full darkness to minimize witnesses and maximize psychological impact. That gave them perhaps 3 hours to prepare for what might be the fight of their lives. Lou faced the most difficult decision of his peaceful existence. His first instinct was to evacuate everyone from the academy, to remove the innocent from harm's way even if it meant sacrificing the sanctuary he'd built to honor Margaret's memory. We should clear out the evening students, Lou decided. Cancel tonight's classes under some pretense, building maintenance, equipment repairs, anything that keeps them away from here. Danny and the other regular students were already arriving. For the 7 p.m. beginners class, when Lou met them at the entrance with his fabricated excuse about electrical problems requiring immediate attention. The disappointment on their faces was painful to witness, but their safety was more important than maintaining his teaching schedule. However, several neighborhood supporters refused to abandon Lou despite the obvious danger. Frank and Patricia, of course, but also Mrs. Chun from the herb shop next door, who had brought homemade soup earlier and sensed something was wrong. Young Danny tried to argue his way into staying, insisting that loyalty to his sifu outweighed personal safety. "This isn't your fight," Lou told each of them, but his words fell on deaf ears. "Maybe not originally," Frank replied with characteristic bluntness, "but it is now. Nobody threatens my neighbors on my watch." Patricia's military training made her practical about their situation. Running just delays the inevitable and leaves us vulnerable in unfamiliar territory. At least here we know the layout and have some defensive advantages. Seagal had multiple opportunities to slip away unnoticed during the preparations, and everyone expected him to take the easy path he'd followed throughout his career. Instead, he remained steadfast in his decision to face the consequences of his actions. "For once in my life, I'm not running from a real fight," he declared, his voice carrying conviction that surprised even himself. "These people are in danger because of my mistakes. I won't abandon them to clean up my mess." Lou nodded with newfound respect. "Then we stand together and face whatever comes." As darkness settled over the industrial neighborhood, the rumble of motorcycle engines announced Volkov's arrival with military precision. Lou watched from the academy windows as 8 men instead of the expected 5 deployed around the building, their movements coordinated like a special forces operation. The Russians had clearly upgraded their approach based on intelligence about the previous day's resistance. They moved with tactical discipline, cutting off escape routes and establishing overlapping fields of fire that would make any attempt to flee suicidal. Frank's Marine experience proved invaluable as he coordinated their defensive positions using the Academy's layout to their advantage. "They've got us surrounded, but that also means they have to split their forces," he observed. "We just need to make them pay a price for every inch they want to take." Patricia established her medical station in Lou's apartment upstairs, positioning supplies and equipment for maximum efficiency while maintaining a clear view of the main floor through the stairway. Her calm preparation under pressure revealed the depth of her military experience. Seagal and Lou positioned themselves to protect the civilians while maintaining fighting effectiveness. Despite their philosophical differences, they had developed an intuitive understanding of each other's capabilities during their brief training sessions. Marcus, terrified but unable to abandon the people who had protected him, provided intelligence about Volkov's methods based on previous encounters he'd witnessed or heard about. "He likes to make examples," Marcus warned. "The violence is always worse than necessary to send a message to others." Volkov's voice amplified through a portable speaker, his accented English carrying clearly through the Academy's walls. "Mr. Lou, we have no personal quarrel with you. Send out Steven Seagal, and this unpleasantness ends peacefully for everyone else." The offer was almost certainly a lie. Volkov's reputation suggested he rarely left witnesses to his methods, but it forced Lou to make a choice that would define his character. Everything he'd taught about protecting the innocent was now being tested in the most direct way possible. Lou's response carried decades of conviction. "Mr. Volkov, no one in my academy will be surrendered to violence. If you want to settle debts, you'll have to come inside and face all of us." The declaration sent a ripple of nervous energy through their small group. Frank grinned with approval, while Patricia checked her medical supplies one final time. Seagal looked both grateful and terrified that someone was willing to stand between him and the consequences of his choices. Volkov's laughter echoed through the speaker system. "Very well, old man. You have chosen to make this difficult. My associates, and I will accept your invitation." The siege began in earnest as Volkov signaled his men to take positions around every entrance and window. The Academy's large open space that had seemed so welcoming during the day now felt exposed and vulnerable, with too many angles of approach and too few places to take cover. Lou found himself facing the greatest test of his martial arts philosophy, the moment when peaceful principles collided with the harsh reality of violent men who respected nothing but superior force. "Remember," he said quietly to his unlikely band of defenders, "we're not trying to win a war. We just need to survive long enough for help to arrive." Patricia had quietly called 911 during their preparations. Though police response time in this industrial area was notoriously slow, the waiting was almost worse than the violence that was sure to follow. The first wave of attack came through the front entrance with shocking suddenness. 3 men wielding baseball bats burst through the door, clearly expecting to intimidate a group of elderly martial artists into immediate submission. Instead, they encountered Liu and Seagal fighting as a perfectly coordinated team. Liu's Wing Chun precision combined with Seagal's aikido power in ways that surprised both masters. Where Liu used sensitivity and redirection to neutralize incoming force, Seagal amplified that redirection into devastating throws and joint locks. Where Seagal created openings through leverage and positioning, Liu filled them with precise strikes that ended threats efficiently. The wooden training dummies that had seemed decorative during peaceful demonstrations now became tactical assets. Liu used their positioning to channel attackers into killing zones where their superior numbers became a disadvantage rather than an asset. Frank coordinated from behind the reception desk, using furniture and equipment to create improvised cover, while directing the flow of battle. His Vietnam experience showed in the way he anticipated enemy movements and positioned obstacles to funnel attackers into the master's effective range. The first 3 Russians retreated quickly, bloodied and shocked by the fierce resistance they'd encountered. One nursing a dislocated shoulder from Seagal's throw, another limping from Liu's pressure point strike to his thigh, the third simply stunned by the coordinated violence they'd faced from supposedly peaceful martial artists. Patricia treated minor cuts on Liu's hands with efficient field medicine, while Frank reported through the window that the Russians were regrouping for a more serious assault. "They're bringing more people around to the back," he warned. "Next wave's going to be bigger and nastier." Seagal, energized by fighting alongside a genuine master instead of against choreographed opponents, actually grinned despite their desperate situation. "That was better than any movie stunt work I've ever done," he admitted. "When you know what you're fighting for, everything changes." Liu smiled back, recognizing the transformation taking place in his former adversary. "Wait until you see what we can do with proper preparation," he replied, using the brief respite to adjust their positioning and coordinate their next defensive strategy. Marcus documented everything from his position near the stairway, not for exploitation this time, but as potential evidence for legal proceedings. His camera captured the fluid cooperation between 2 masters who had found common purpose in protecting innocent people. The Academy's atmosphere had transformed completely from the peaceful learning environment Liu had envisioned. Equipment was scattered, folding chairs overturned, and the polished concrete floor now bore scuff marks from the brief but intense combat. But something else had changed as well. The group of unlikely allies had discovered they could work together effectively. Under pressure, Frank's tactical coordination, Patricia's medical support, Liu's martial precision, and Seagal's raw power had combined into something greater than the sum of its parts. "Here they come again," Frank warned, spotting movement outside. "5 this time, and they look a lot more serious about their business." Liu and Seagal exchanged a glance of mutual respect and understanding. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, standing between violence and the innocent people they had chosen to protect. The second wave proved far more dangerous than the first. Volkov sent 5 men through multiple entrances simultaneously, forcing Liu and Seagal to split their defensive efforts and fight on separate fronts. The coordinated assault demonstrated military-level tactical planning that pushed their improvised defense to its limits. Liu faced 3 attackers in the main training area, using the wooden dummies and wall-mounted equipment to extend his effectiveness against superior numbers. His movements flowed like water around violence, each Wing Chun technique demonstrating decades of refinement under pressure. A chain punch combination dropped one attacker, while simultaneous pack saw and lap saw trapped another's weapon long. Enough for a devastating elbow strike. Meanwhile, Seagal confronted 2 men in the narrow hallway leading to Liu's apartment, where his aikido throwing techniques proved devastatingly effective in the confined space. The cramped quarters that limited his opponent's mobility actually favored his close-range grappling skills, allowing him to use walls and door frames as additional weapons. Frank provided tactical support from his position behind overturned furniture, calling out warnings about flanking movements while using improvised projectiles to disrupt attacks. His marine training showed in the way he read the flow of battle and positioned obstacles to protect their most vulnerable angles, Patricia found. herself treating Marcus for a head wound when flying debris caught him during the fighting. Her steady hands and combat medical training kept him conscious and functional despite the chaos erupting around their position. The second wave's retreat was less organized than the first, with 2 men requiring assistance to walk and all 5 clearly shaken by the resistance they'd encountered. Volkov's assumption about elderly martial artists had proven dangerously incorrect. "They're not giving up," Frank observed grimly, watching through the window as the Russians regrouped once again. "But they're sure as hell thinking twice about what they signed up for." The brief respite allowed them to assess damage and adjust their strategy. Lu's hands showed more cuts from blocking improvised weapons, while Seagal nursed bruised ribs from a lucky shot one attacker had landed before being thrown into a wall. "We can't keep this up indefinitely," Patricia warned with medical pragmatism. "Fatigue is going to become a factor soon, and they have fresh reinforcements we don't." As if summoned by her words, Volkov himself appeared in the academy's main entrance, flanked by his 2 most dangerous-looking lieutenants. His massive presence filled the doorway as he surveyed the damage to his crew with cold calculation. "Impressive," he admitted in his accented English, stepping carefully over debris from the earlier fights. "But you have merely delayed the inevitable outcome. I was Spetsnaz before I became a businessman. Allow me to demonstrate what real combat training accomplishes." Lu and Seagal exchanged glances, both recognizing that they were about to face their most dangerous opponent yet. Everything up to this point had been preliminary. Now they would discover whether their combined skills could match a professional soldier with nothing to lose. That Volkov's confidence wasn't mere posturing. His movements as he advanced showed the fluid economy of someone who had killed with his bare hands and lived to perfect the techniques that had kept him alive through conflicts most people couldn't imagine. The final test of their unlikely alliance was about to begin. Volkov advanced with the confidence of someone who had never lost a physical confrontation, his movements betraying extensive combat sambo training that made him far more dangerous than his hired muscle. Unlike his subordinates, who relied on intimidation and numbers, Volkov possessed the technical skill and psychological composure of a professional killer. His opening attack targeted Seagal with a powerful leg sweep followed immediately by ground fighting techniques designed to neutralize Aikido's standing advantages. The combination was executed with military precision, forcing Seagal to defend desperately against an opponent who understood exactly how to counter his throwing-based martial arts. Lu intervened with Wing Chun's chi saw sensitivity, disrupting Volkov's grappling attempts through precise pressure point strikes that temporarily paralyzed the Russians' grip strength. The 3-way battle showcased authentic martial arts at the highest level. No choreography, no pulled punches, just survival-driven technique refined through decades of training. Frank positioned himself to protect Patricia and Marcus while seeking opportunities to assist the masters without interfering with their fluid movements. His military experience told him this was a different class of opponent entirely, someone whose skills had been tested in life-or-death situations far more brutal than any civilian confrontation. That Volkov's combat sambo proved devastatingly effective. In close quarters, when Seagal attempted a classical aikido throw, the Russian countered with a hip toss that sent the movie star crashing into wall-mounted equipment. When Lu tried to use Wing Chun's trapping range, Volkov responded with elbow strikes and knee attacks that forced the elderly master into purely defensive positions. "You fight well for old men," Volkov admitted with professional respect, circling like a predator evaluating wounded prey. "But age is a disadvantage that skill cannot completely overcome." "This ends now," Patricia called out medical warnings about exhaustion and injury accumulation as both masters began showing the effects of sustained combat against a younger, stronger opponent. Lu's breathing was becoming labored, while Seagal moved with the careful precision of someone nursing multiple impact injuries. Frank realized they needed an equalizer beyond pure martial arts technique. "The environment," he shouted desperately. "Use the whole space, not just your bodies." Lu's eyes widened with understanding as he remembered Wing Chun's ultimate principle, adaptation to circumstance. The academy itself could become a weapon if used correctly, its layout and equipment transformed from training tools into tactical advantages. When Volkov launched his most powerful combination, a series of sambo throws designed to end the fight. Decisively, Liu responded by incorporating the Academy's wooden dummy array into his defensive strategy. Instead of meeting force with force, he used the training equipment to redirect Volkov's momentum while maintaining his own balance and positioning. Seagal, following Liu's lead, began using Aikido's redirection principles on a room-sized scale. Where Liu channeled Volkov's attacks into obstacles, Seagal amplified those redirections with throws that used walls, equipment, and floor mats as additional leverage points. The tide of battle shifted as the two masters stopped fighting Volkov directly and started using his own aggression against him through environmental manipulation. Every charge became an opportunity to guide him into disadvantageous positions, every attack a chance to use his momentum for their own purposes. Frank coordinated the environmental aspects, controlling lighting and positioning obstacles to favor the defenders, while Patricia provided medical support and tactical warnings about Volkov's condition and likely next moves. The climactic moment arrived when Volkov, frustrated by his inability to end the fight quickly, launched his most devastating attack, a combat sambo combination that had never failed him in decades of violent encounters. The technique was designed to overwhelm through pure aggression, using strength and conditioning to power through any defense. But Liu responded with Wing Chun's deepest principle, borrowing force. As Volkov's devastating strike approached, Liu stepped offline at precisely the right angle while simultaneously pulling the Russian forward, using his own momentum to amplify the redirection rather than simply deflecting it. The technique was almost invisible to untrained eyes, a subtle shift in positioning, a gentle pull at exactly the right moment, a redirection so smooth it appeared effortless. But the effect was devastating as Volkov's own power carried him past his target and toward the Academy's large front window. Seagal provided the finishing element with a perfect Aikido throw that used Volkov's compromised balance and forward momentum to send him crashing through the reinforced glass. The combination of Wing Chun's redirection and Aikido's amplification created a technique that neither master could have executed alone. Volkov's massive frame shattered the window completely as he tumbled into the parking lot, finally unconscious from the impact and the accumulated damage of fighting two masters simultaneously. The sound of breaking glass seemed to echo through the Academy like a bell announcing the end of hostilities. With their leader defeated, Volkov's remaining men lost their will to continue fighting. The psychological impact of seeing their supposedly invincible commander overcome by elderly martial artists shattered their confidence completely. They began retreating to their motorcycles, more concerned with escape than completing their mission. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Patricia's earlier call for help was finally bearing fruit, though the response had taken far longer than anyone had hoped. The cavalry was arriving just as the battle concluded, which was probably for the best given the legal complications that would have followed police involvement in active combat. Frank coordinated with the arriving officers to secure the scene, while Patricia moved between treating wounded Russians and checking on their own group for serious injuries. Her professional ethics required providing medical care even to their attackers, though she prioritized the defenders' needs. Marcus, shaken but unharmed, documented everything with his camera, not for exploitation this time, but as crucial evidence for the legal proceedings that would surely follow. His footage would prove essential in establishing the self-defense nature of their actions. Seagal helped Liu survey the damage to the Academy with genuine regret for his role in bringing violence to this peaceful place. The sanctuary Liu had built to honor Margaret's memory bore the scars of combat, but it had also proven that peaceful principles could coexist with necessary violence when innocent lives were threatened. Detective Maria Santos arrived to take statements from all participants, her experienced eye immediately recognizing the difference between criminal violence and justified self-defense. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, witness testimony, and Marcus's documentation all supported their version of events that Liu's account emphasized protection of innocent people and community self-defense, while Seagal accepted full responsibility for the financial circumstances that had created the dangerous situation. Marcus provided crucial evidence about Volkov's criminal loan practices and threats against innocent people. The immediate physical threat was over, but the legal and emotional consequences were just beginning to unfold. The weeks following the confrontation passed in a blur of legal proceedings, insurance claims, and media attention that Liu found deeply uncomfortable. Detective Santos proved invaluable in navigating the complex investigation, her understanding of the self-defense circumstances helping to shield the defenders from prosecution while building a strong case against Volkov's criminal organization. Volkov himself faced federal charges for racketeering, illegal lending practices, and assault with deadly weapons. His organization crumbled as other victims came forward, emboldened by the example of ordinary citizens who had successfully resisted his intimidation tactics. Marcus cooperated fully with federal investigators, providing recordings and documentation that exposed the full scope of Volkov's criminal enterprise. His filmmaker's instincts for preserving evidence proved crucial in building cases against multiple defendants. Seagal's financial situation remained complicated, but the publicity from the confrontation, framed as action star redeems himself, protecting community, generated enough legitimate interest to resolve his debt crisis through proper channels rather than criminal coercion. The Academy's repairs took nearly 2 months, funded by insurance money and an unexpected flood of community donations from people inspired by the story of neighbors protecting each other. Local businesses contributed materials and labor, transforming the restoration into a community-building project. Liu used the repair period to reflect on everything that had happened, processing the violence through meditation and long conversations with Patricia about the intersection of peaceful principles and necessary action. Her military perspective helped him understand that protecting innocent people sometimes required accepting the burden of violence. Frank coordinated much of the reconstruction work, his mechanical expertise and leadership skills proving invaluable in managing the complex project. The academy that emerged from the repairs was stronger and more beautiful than the original, with enhanced security features disguised as architectural elements. The grand reopening, held on a sunny Saturday 3 months after the confrontation, drew hundreds of community members and martial arts practitioners from across Los Angeles. Local news crews documented the ceremony, focusing on the themes of community resilience and authentic martial arts training. But the most significant change was philosophical rather than physical. Liu had discovered that his peaceful academy could coexist with the reality of violence when that violence served to protect rather than dominate. The academy's mission expanded to include practical self-defense alongside traditional forms. Seagal had undergone the most dramatic transformation, emerging from the crisis as a legitimate martial arts student rather than a manufactured celebrity. His humility and dedication to authentic learning earned grudging respect from Liu's other students, who gradually accepted him as a member of their extended family. Patricia and Frank became unofficial assistant instructors, their military experience adding practical self-defense elements to the traditional curriculum. The academy began offering specialized classes for seniors, veterans, and anyone seeking to develop confidence alongside physical skills. Marcus redirected his documentary filmmaking toward educational content about authentic martial arts traditions, using his technical skills to preserve and promote traditional knowledge rather than exploit it for entertainment value. The Academy's reputation spread throughout the martial arts community as a place where different fighting styles could be studied respectfully, where authentic masters shared knowledge freely, and where the principles of protection and community service were taken seriously. 3 months after the confrontation that had nearly destroyed it, the Academy hosted its first joint graduation ceremony, where students demonstrated techniques that seamlessly blended Wing Chun's efficiency with Aikido's flowing power. The integration of different martial arts philosophies had created something new and beautiful. Liu conducted the ceremony with quiet pride, watching his students perform techniques that honored both traditions while creating synthesis through respectful exchange. Danny's demonstration was particularly impressive, showing how Wing Chun's centerline theory could enhance Aikido's circular movements. Seagal assisted with instruction while maintaining proper respect for Liu as Sifu, his transformation from arrogant celebrity to humble student complete and genuine. His knowledge of Aikido principles, refined through authentic Wing Chun training, made him an effective teacher for students seeking to understand the relationship between different martial arts systems. Frank taught a popular senior citizens self-defense class that emphasized practical awareness and simple techniques over athletic prowess. His direct teaching style and emphasis on situational awareness resonated with older students who wanted protection without pretension. Patricia ran a comprehensive first aid program for martial arts students, combining traditional Chinese healing knowledge with modern medical techniques. Her classes were mandatory for advanced students, ensuring that the academy's community could care for itself during training and emergencies. Marcus had found his calling creating educational documentaries about authentic martial arts masters, using his technical expertise to preserve traditional knowledge for future generations. His work was gaining recognition in both martial arts and film communities for its respectful approach to cultural documentation. The Academy thrived as a true community center where neighbors gathered for more than just martial arts training. Children's classes, senior fitness programs, cultural events, and community meetings all found their place within Lu's expanded vision of what his tribute to Margaret could become. As the celebration continued into the evening, Lu and Seagal sat quietly in a corner, watching their students and friends enjoy the festivities. The contrast with their first meeting could not have been more complete. Where once there had been confrontation, now there was cooperation. Where once there had been disrespect, now there was mutual admiration. "I came here to prove my superiority," Seagal reflected, his voice carrying the wisdom that came from genuine humility, and instead learned that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than putting them down. Lu responded with the gentle wisdom that had guided him through 7 decades of learning. The greatest victory is not defeating your enemy, but transforming them into your ally. When anger becomes understanding, conflict becomes cooperation, and competition becomes collaboration. They watched Danny demonstrate a technique that perfectly combined Wing Chun's direct efficiency with Aikido's flowing redirection, living proof that authentic martial arts grew stronger through respectful exchange rather than bitter rivalry. The story concluded with Lu's final reflection as he observed the thriving community that had emerged from crisis. True mastery lay not in defeating opponents, but in creating a world where such defeats became unnecessary. Margaret would have been proud of what her memory had inspired, not just a martial arts academy, but a sanctuary where different people could find common ground through shared respect and mutual protection. The academy's lights stayed on late into the night, illuminating a space where traditional wisdom and modern understanding had found perfect harmony. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.